Okay, recording in progress. And Wendy, do you want to? Yep, Wendy's chatted the slides. You might have to do it one or two more times. And we've decided that it would be best for us to chat the slides to you and invite you to follow along with the slides with us, so that we could be more in relationship here with all of us having our Zoom screens visible to one another. My name is Lori Ryan, and I'm coming to you from Denver, Colorado, and welcome you to session A6. The title of our session, I need to open it up. The title of our session is Appreciative Leadership, a relational journey of learners and an inspiring text. And we're honored to be here together. I'm going to invite the co-presenters with me to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Wendy Allen. I'm co-director of this program and project with Lori, and I work at a place called Clayton Early Learning.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susana Ramirez, and I am an alumni from Cohort 12, which is the program that we went through and we learned about this appreciative leadership. And I currently work for Adams County Head Start in Colorado.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tangela, and I was also a part of Cohort 12 of the Buell Early Childhood Leadership Program, along with Susanna. And currently, I work for the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment as their race equity specialist. And it's so nice to see all your beautiful faces this morning. If you're able to, continue to have that. If not, totally understand. Do what you need to do that's supportive for you. I'm just going to invite us all to a quick chat because we'd love to know where y'all are coming from. So in the chat, if you could write out just your name, where you're joining the session from, and then let's see, I'm going to put this in the chat and then I'll read it as well. So maybe a question mark if you're coming in curious and not familiar with appreciative leadership, a plus sign if you're already pretty engaged in the study of appreciative leadership and the practice of appreciative leadership, maybe a smiley face if you're just happy to be here with us in the space, or another symbol that you're coming in. Maybe it's a different winky face or whatever it is, but would love to see that. Just give y'all a few minutes to see it in the chat. Thanks, Alicia. Italy, okay, smiley face. Antonella, hopefully I'm saying your name correctly. If not, please correct me. Dr. Vince Carbino, principal at Los Angeles Unified, great. I'm Justios from Netherlands. Wow, this is great. This is truly a global conference. And I will say this is actually my first time. I've done conferences in the United States, but not in a virtual space that's fully global. So this is fantastic. Michelle, thank you, from Geneva, New York. Plus minus, plus-ish. This is fantastic. Okay, did everybody get a chance to put in their responses in chat? I believe so. All right, then I think I'll turn it back over to either Lori or Wendy at this point.
I think it's me. I'm going to set a little bit of context for us around the program that we all come into relationship with each other around. And you can see on slide 2 that it's a partnership program. This is a graduate certificate program in early childhood leadership. It's 18 credits. There's 6 courses in total. And those are really designed around this idea that we're cultivating leadership capacity to affect change within early childhood contexts, programs, policies, and practices to advance equity, excellence, and opportunity with all young children and families. And there's 3 partners. So there's an institution of higher ed, CU Denver, School of Education and Human Development. And we partner, Clayton Early Learning is a local nonprofit that we have an educare school and also do some professional development work. And so we partner with CU Denver, and we are fully funded through a local philanthropic organization called the Buell Foundation, and they fund a variety of early childhood programs around our state of Colorado specifically. And so that's the program itself and who the partners are. On slide 3, I'm going to share a little bit more about the structure of the program and our focus. And so we go through 3 phases of a process of inquiry, dialogue, self-reflection, and collaborative experiences, both in a cohort. So we have cohorts of about 18 to 22 people per year. So this journey takes us about 13 months, a little over a year, to go through this process together. And we start with this center circle of leading within, in which that we help to engage, and we go through an intentional process where we flow out this beginning circle with looking at our own personal identities, values, leadership theories, and practices toward ultimately equitable and diverse, inclusive early childhood environments. But it starts with this looking within process. And so the 2 courses there are Introduction to Transformational Leadership and Leadership for Equity in Early Childhood Programs. And then in the fall, we move out into the second circle, where we begin to talk about how we are leading with others, and we apply appreciative and inclusive leadership practices with children, families, and colleagues to deepen our awareness and understanding of dynamic ecologies where children and adults live and learn. The stories that are going to unfold today in our dialogue with you occur in this moment of the journey, where we're engaged in these 2 courses, child development and leading learning organizations, which is where we do the study of appreciative leadership in the program. And then those practices flow out into leading across, where fellows engage in community-based action research and policy and advocacy. So we build on the themes of appreciative and inclusive practices out into the community, out into the communities of the fellows in ways that reflect how they want to illuminate opportunities that they're seeing to foster participatory action around things that have meaning for young children and families in their context. And then on slide 4, that was a bit about what we do together. Slide 4 is more about how we engage in that together. And we, as core faculty of the program, there have been 4 leadership learning design principles that have emerged for us. And these really are not meant to be a framework, but they're really meant to make visible what we are learning to be most reflective on when it comes to our teaching and learning practice. They're touch points for dialogue for us around our pedagogy across the year with the fellows and with each other. And as you see, one of the petals specifically calls out an appreciative stance that we promote the potential in self and others as human energy is unleashed. I think it's helpful, though, for us to just pause for a moment and have everyone absorb the 4 petals and what they see in those. And just take a moment to look at those, and we invite you to think of your own learning journey that you're on, and all the different places that are represented here today, and where have you been and where are you going, and which one of these 4 leadership learning design principles are connecting with you, or do you see potential to bring to life more of in this moment for you? Is it identity and agency that's calling you? Do you see socially constructed pedagogy as something that you're interested in, contextually relevant learning, or appreciative stance? Just to get a little interaction around the flower. And you can, honestly, you can chat, or you could unmute and speak to one for a moment. Any of them calling? Any of them resonating? And perhaps maybe it would be helpful to visualize it together. I'm going to share my screen just for a moment, just so that I know that you know what I'm looking at. This flower, and this is our 4 leadership learning design principles. Is there one that you are just particularly interested in or drawn to at this moment? And you can chat or unmute. And if not, that's okay. We'll move on. I just like to pause.
It's hard to just go with one. They really all apply.
Well, that's how we feel too. They're all really integrated for us and weave together. So even though we're highlighting appreciative stance today, for us, it really does weave through, though, all of these being valuable in our practice, and that they come together as a whole rather than only one being important. And we wanted to lay that context for you as we do, though, dive into more specifically this idea of appreciative stance.
Wendy, I'll just say, from looking at the 4, what really hits me is the identity and agency piece.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm a K-12 administrator, well, TK to 12, and one of my fears is how much academia, K-12 education, we try to socially construct the futures of our kids, pull out the crystal balls, rather than listening to their dreams, their desires, and focusing our energy towards those so that they can construct their path in life.
Yes. Yeah. It's really powerful. Thank you for sharing. Well, I think Lori's going to transition us now to appreciative leadership. And Lori, did you want me to keep this screen on?
Please do. On occasion, when I'm on Zoom, I can't toggle back over to Google without losing view. So this is helpful for me. Vince, thank you for your comment. I think about this often, about the entire P20 continuum and the many parallel processes that are at play when we work with different age groups. The 4 of us are really dedicated to the birth through 8 span of life, but we also, of course, know that our children are moving on to the next phase. And then also, of course, we work with graduate students, and their identity and agency is critical for the future of children and families. So it's really a powerful concept that you introduced. I'm going to take us through a few slides here to narrow us down to that petal of appreciative stance and speak specifically of this incredible text that we've been honored to have in the program since 2013, Appreciative Leadership, written by Whitney, Trosten-Bloom, and Rader, was published in 2010. And I joined the program in 2013 and introduced it, in that I also, Vince, was in a school district in St. Louis, Missouri, and we were studying this text. We were studying the work of appreciative inquiry specifically. And then Whitney and Trosten-Bloom wrote the text on appreciative leadership. It has since been a core text for the program since 2013, since cohort 6. So when we say over 100 Buell Early Childhood Leadership Program fellows have been exploring this text, it's really closer to 200. And it's one thing that we want to highlight is that the book, one of the reasons why the book is so attractive to us is that it's very practitioner focused, even though it has a theoretical framework and we flow between theoretical concepts. We flow organically from theoretical context to practice-based learning. And these pause buttons that permeate the book all the way throughout are the gems that we mine in the text. And when later, when Vani and Susanna share, they're going to share from these practice-based pause buttons and the beautiful stories that emerge from them. And I just scanned one onto this slide, which is a pretty nice one, where right at the beginning of the book, the authors ask us to pause and reflect. Are people in your organization pulled inside their shells like turtles, playing it safe, or are they expressing themselves in positively powerful ways? And how about you? Are you at the top of your game? What is about your work environment that enables you to be and feel powerful? And then how are you sharing that power? So we are grateful to these authors. I was a little nervous that one of them might show up at this workshop, but they didn't. But they are very connected to the Taos Institute. Next slide, please. So the 5 I's of appreciative leadership is the way that the book and the philosophy and practice of appreciative leadership is structured. Inquiry, illumination, inclusion, inspiration, and integrity. And after a couple of intro chapters orienting us, as well as concluding chapters, rounding out the study of the book is organized with these 5 chapters, each individual I. And in a leadership learning development program like ours, it's really powerful to see the process of how people engage with different I's, because each one really catalyzes a different type of leading. So for instance, inquiry, we lead by asking positively powerful questions, and then there's unique benefits to the people and the learning community, versus inclusion, which is more about the leading processes of engaging others to co-create the future. And that gives people a sense of belonging. So it's always fun being faculty in this course, in this specific course of leading learning organizations, to see which I's people are drawn to. Kind of like when Wendy asks you which petal are you drawn to, it's really fun to see, who is really drawn to inquiry, who's drawn to inspiration, which I's really catalyze transformational change for them. Next slide. So here's the yet. So although we were engaged in this incredible journey of learning over the course of cohort 6 through 11 with the book, something was starting to emerge. This kind of niggly thing was happening. What is not quite hitting the mark with the book? And it was during cohort 12, where with Vani and Susanna are members of students within, fellows within, where we started to recognize that the many examples within the book were beginning to feel a bit dated. Again, the book was written in 2010. And while there were many applications of leadership across multiple different disciplines, and that those are incredibly helpful to have from a worldview. None of them resided within our world of early childhood leadership, and few, very few, resided within the educational domain or space. And as faculty, we were really on a search for books written by people of color, to bring, to be more inclusive of diverse voices, and the text authors are all white women. So we recognize these challenges, we name these challenges, and despite these challenges, the text was still embraced by Susanna, Vani, and the other 16 wise and wonderful women of cohort 12. And their engagement with the text continued to affirm for us how it really does fit beautifully within our leadership learning design principles, how it really helps us focus on unleashing the power of human potential and inclusive practices within early childhood organizations. So we continue to engage in the relational process of learning together around this book and the practices it nurtures. And we knew there was a way to understand how appreciative leadership could further unfold for us. So with that little story, we wanted to ask you just to take 2-3 minutes to maybe do some reflection, even take pen to paper, type into a document, some personal journaling. Reflect if there has been, within your context or your experience, a dilemma similar, a challenge or a time for growth when you could have or you did invite others to engage, to share their knowledge and experience. How did that or might that have enhanced your learning? So just 2-3 minutes, watching the clock, it's 10:24. So come back at 10:27, having reflected on perhaps a time when you reached out to others to engage, to share their knowledge when you were experiencing a challenge similar to the one that we were experiencing. And as you're wrapping up your thoughts, I'm going to suggest, Winnie, that we just keep the slide share going because we can see everyone this way. And welcome the incredible voices now for the remainder of the session of Bonnie and Susanna, who will share the story of how we engaged over a few years, including an inquiry of documentation of appreciative leadership practices, illuminating the voices of early childhood leadership in contextually relevant spaces where the members of our communities embrace the 5 I's of appreciative leadership.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are truly honored to share how appreciative leadership really influenced us, Bonnie and I, and many other fellows, and our journeys that we started back in cohort 12, and for some of us in the following cohorts, and we continue in that journey. But our journey has always been within the field of early childhood education. And we are happy to be here today to share our story of how the Appreciative Leadership Guide came to fruition, thanks to the collaboration and input from so many people. Our appreciative leadership journey started as fellows from cohort 12. Vanya and I were fellows at that time, and Wendy, Lori, and 2 other faculty were part of the program faculty. We used the Appreciative Leadership book as part of our Leading and Learning course. For some fellows in cohort 12, appreciative leadership strongly resonated and heavily influenced our leadership lens. Especially, I can speak for myself, it truly changed my idea of what leadership was, and as a leader, what is my role, and what should I be doing to not only enhance the lives of children and their families, but also enhance the lives of the staff that I work side by side every day. So I think that because Lori saw the passion that some of us had, she reached out to a few of us in the summer of 2020, and she asked, should we consider continuing the use of the Appreciative Leadership book in the course? I think that all of us in our own way shared the same thing. And it was like discontinuing the book would be a disservice to future cohorts. Yes, we also agreed with Lori. The voices of people of color are missing. And the book was written more towards examples in the corporate world, in the business world. And that's not necessarily what we do in early childhood education. So we did understand that part, but we still thought that the book was very meaningful, and it really influenced a lot of our leadership choices and styles that we went back to our organizations and we used. So Lori listened, and she took our input into consideration, and she kept using the book, which is such a great thing that she did. Because it does influence everybody who is impacted by this philosophy. So in the fall of 2020, Lori asked for some of our support to co-facilitate the I's for cohort 13. And 3 of us volunteered to help Lori teach those I's. And again, the 3 of us who were there were very passionate about appreciative leadership and what it stands for. Later on, Lori did contact Bonnie and I to pose the idea of developing the Appreciative Leadership Guide around early childhood education context. And Bonnie and I took the opportunity. We hit the floor running. We studied over 200 PASBA narrative responses. These responses were all within the early childhood education context, and they came from fellows from cohort 12 and cohort 13. It was hard to choose which of these stories truly best represented the I within the early childhood education field. There were so many great stories, but we ended up selecting the stories that we really thought aligned with each I the best. These stories came from just people in different roles. We had stories from teachers, from leaders, and other professionals in the early childhood education field. once we were ready to organize the guide, the idea came up that we should really look at organizing it by themes. And these themes came from the pause buttons and the narratives that we selected. And Bonnie is going to talk a little bit more about that later on. But when we finished that process and we were done, we wanted to know if we truly brought in stories from people of color and also from different areas across Colorado, like rural areas and urban areas. Because when we looked at the stories, they were just numbers. We didn't have names, we didn't have anything that could identify the individual. And so when we went back and we looked at what the stories that we had selected and who wrote them, we are so happy to announce that 50% of the narratives came from people of color, and that we did have representation from both rural and urban areas across Colorado, which was important to us because that was something that we thought would have made the Appreciative Leadership book a whole lot more meaningful because of the field that we are in. The co-creation of the guide was truly a relational process. Yes, it was co-led by faculty, which is Lori and Wendy, and by Vani and I as alumni, but it wasn't developed by us. I mean, this was truly influenced by so many people. We had the guide influenced by 18 fellows from cohort 12, 22 fellows from cohort 13. We had the book as our course book, the Appreciative Leadership book. And then once we developed the Appreciative Leadership Guide based solely on early childhood education context, cohort 14, which were 18 fellows, used the guide and the book as part of their course material. This idea was truly brought to fruition by over 60 individuals in the early childhood education field. The intent is to really go even deeper with cohorts 14's contributions, their practices, and their stories. Currently, the guide that we developed only has 4 eyes instead of 5. And that was because we wanted to present the guide to cohort 14. And if we had included the last eye that we did not include in this one, we weren't going to have enough time. So that's still part of our project, and it's still part of something that we are going to include in the future. But the guide is not the final step. Truly, it is just one more step to continue supporting the appreciative leadership philosophy in the early childhood education field. Because personally, and I've heard other stories as well, this philosophy really aligns with the world of the early childhood education field. And personally, from my view and what I do, it has truly influenced so many people. Like, we had a book club, and the book club is by all of our leadership team, and we reviewed this book as part of it. And we went out and we did the pause buttons, and now we have our own stories within the early childhood education field that we can share and that we can attest to, that this is really helpful. It helps build relationships. It helps build that sense of community, which is truly essential, especially when we're working with young children. So I want to go ahead and let Vani start by sharing the theme and a story of one of the eyes, but we will share all of the eyes with you and the themes behind them, and just a little bit, a tidbit of a story from each eye.
Thank you, Susanna. Thanks everyone again. So I will kick us off with the first I, or inquiry, asking positively powerful questions. And as Susanna shared, we did engage in this very emergent and appreciative inquiry process where we co-authored the guide over the past summer. And, you know, as we're going through the hundreds of stories, themes did start to emerge. I don't think when we went in, we knew exactly how this guide was gonna come about, or in what stories would be used, or anything like that. But I think what is so powerful is that it's fitting for, as Susanna has shared, it was fitting for the early childhood context. And I'm not going to read each of the themes, but they really do speak to the perspectives and experiences of the Buell leaders, and both not only in their professional settings, but I also think their personal settings, right? And so the themes of the and these themes made the Appreciative Leadership text that much more powerful, relevant, and applicable than if we were to have just move forward without the context setting. And I think I just want to share my own personal story about the transformative power of inquiry. I was part of cohort 12, as I shared earlier. And as I was going through the leading learning organizations part of the course, something just kept like itching or nagging at me. And I was on my own kind of personal journey of equity and what that meant for me in my role personally and professionally. And at that time of leading learning organizations, I was working for a nonprofit, and it's focused on early childhood systems, and it was a statewide nonprofit, really well known. And it was apparent to me that although we placed the value of equity in our work, just the actions and the way we made routine decisions, big and small, didn't really actually center equity. And that was, really bothersome for me, and in trying to move towards the path of integrity, both personally and professionally, right? And I think if I wasn't going through the program, I'm not sure I would have felt empowered to be able to engage with the leadership team, both at that time, the executive director, as well as my direct supervisor at that time, in these conversations. And because I was able to come from a place of inquiry, asking questions without that judgment, I think it allowed for that dialogue and for real concerns and perspectives to be heard, and thinking about opportunities of, okay, well, where can we do, or where are there opportunities to integrate equity in both our organizational functions as well as how we partner across statewide, across communities in the state of Colorado. And so I think my sort of aha is inquiry leads to curiosity, and curiosity is the antidote to judgment, right? And I think that defensiveness is like stripped away when we're coming from that place of, I really want to hear your perspective. I also want to seek that perspective. And I truly believe in this world, I think when we're constantly being reinforced to disconnect from ourselves, disconnect from others and our shared humanity, inquiry is really that way to move through, whether that's conflict or just tension or even just different perspectives. And so as I continue to have these conversations, not only did I gain clarity on where I want to focus my time and energy on, I was also able to explore and discover opportunities that more firmly aligned with my values of centering race equity. And so that led me to this current position where I work where I work in the maternal and child health program, and my full position is dedicated on just focusing on equity and what that means and how can we really improve outcomes for both mothers and children in this context. And I'd love to read this quote from our cohort 13 Buell leader. I sit in a place of moving forward by asking engaging and intentional questions to not only those who agree and think similarly to myself, but also to those who may think differently. For real change to occur, we need to be able to form a base of a relationship with those who think differently than us, and by asking positively powerful questions to gain mutual respect for one another. Once we have formed a base of a relationship, only from there can we progress forward in our social change journey. And that just hits me so deeply because I think that speaks to our current culture, current environment, and the global nature of even this conference of like, we really need to be able to have conversations with one another and be able to dialogue and be able to hear other perspectives. So that's just a little tidbit of inquiry, and I will turn it over to Susanna to share our next slide.
Inclusion. This is truly my favorite I. We always get asked, which one is your favorite I? And you think that, you won't have one, but I really do. And inclusion has been one. The author kind of elaborates on it a little bit by saying that it's engaging with others to co-create the future. And growing up in poverty, I think that that is what truly also helped me embrace this I. Because we learn to support each other to get through life's challenges. I mean, we truly need to work as a community and as a group to help each other out when you lack the resources to move on ahead in life. Also, I do think that this I inclusion aligns with my worldview. Culturally, collectivism plays a central role in my identity. This is how I function. And I function in it personally, and especially in the early childhood education context that I live in every day. I value input from others. I want to listen to various perspectives of a situation and idea. I don't think that one person has all the answers. I thrive in environments that offer a sense of community and interconnectedness. I genuinely believe that co-creating and sharing power is the best approach in decision making. Especially when we're working with young children. I mean, these are lives that we are contributing to and helping mold and shape, and what better way to do it than in a setting where we do promote this sense of community and connectedness. In the early childhood context that I'm in, I'm a quality assurance manager for a Head Start program. I came in with this idea when I started looking at inclusion, and as part of that, I helped kind of embed a lot of things into our systems that have become part of our day-to-day. Every time we're going to develop something new or we need to enhance something, I ask for committees. I ask people to join a committee, and I ensured to personally invite the others. And the others in the Appreciative Leadership book, and how they're defined as people who share different viewpoints from you, viewpoints that you might have a hard time looking at or considering. So if I invite people and I don't see the others, I personally invite them to join our committees, and we work on analyzing or developing and or enhancing systems and services in our program. We had an opportunity to review our 5-year goals. And we developed our program goals around diversity and inclusion and made sure that we included education, we included participation, engagement, and all of these pieces into our goals. And we have embedded the appreciative leadership approach in several facets in our program, from administration to operation, direct services, and even community collaborations. I really think that I gave several fellows the time to sit and reflect on inclusion. And I think that the themes illustrate that. If you look at the themes, I am not as inclusive as I thought I was. I have a lot of work to do here. It takes courage to be able to say that. It takes courage and vulnerability to voice that and really look at yourself in the mirror and say that. If we want to practice inclusion, it starts with ourselves. We, humans, are quick to make judgments and assumptions. Practicing inclusion requires conscious unlearning to not other, and instead to promote belonging. To practice inclusion brings a lens of cultural humility and vulnerability. And then often voices that are most impacted by decisions are the ones that are left out. And remember that power sharing is the antidote. And then the last one was, when you are intentional and deliberate about inclusion, you get better results. For me, this is powerful because it shows that in our context, in early childhood education context, people are truly valuing this, looking at this I and valuing what this I brings. The story that I'm going to share with you is kind of falls under the theme of voices that are most impacted by decisions, of people who are left out. This story was authored by an alumni from cohort 12. And it highlights the notion that children are their own authors, and that those in the early childhood field should consider the voices of children. You know, she brings out the idea that we can't place children in a square. We are used to having children follow our routines at school, make sure that they abide by our schedules and that they learn to function around our style of learning. When really we should place a higher value on individualizing our teaching to meet children's needs. I want to read a quote that came from her because I think it truly summarizes her story. She says, "We need to get to know this child and this child's culture so that we can make school not only relevant, but an enriching learning environment for this child. Each child brings with them a set of skills and interests that unfortunately in the public school system do not always get to shine. I feel like we observe and listen. I feel like if we observe and listen to the children, the early childhood system would be so much better." And truly, I think I like this story because it advocates for the idea that children can be co-creators alongside with us that work in this field, and that they could have a voice to share how their learning is going to look like and take place in the learning spaces of their day-to-day life. Bonnie, do you want to share the next slide?
Yeah, thank you, Susanna. Just reflecting on just what I'm hearing from Susanna, and it's just fairly powerful. So in Illumination, I think about how often we question or doubt ourselves, right? Our inner voice or inner critic, I feel like, is often the loudest. And whenever we reflect on, would we talk to other people the way we talk to ourselves? I'm pretty sure the answer for most people would probably be no, right? And so I think we seldom are extending compassion to ourselves, but also sometimes to others. And if we are doing it, that's great. And I also think it's a lifelong practice, right? So I'll share just a little bit of a more personal story. I think that really speaks to the beauty of Illumination in kind of any context, not just specific to early childhood. So in 2018, my partner was signed up for a half marathon. I quickly Googled, it's 21 kilometers for my international folks, 13.1 miles. And so I wanted to be supportive. I went with him and cheered him on at the finish line. And so when I was waiting at the finish line, I saw all walks of life and just going through and doing it. And I think I was like, oh, this would be kind of cool to do, but I'm not an athlete. I'm not a runner. I had all these like doubts of self-belief. I'm like, no, like who goes and runs for fun? Like that's not a thing. But anyways, as he was finishing up and I cheered him on, I was sitting with him and he was like, and I was like, I think I want to do it, but I don't think I'm a runner. Like, I don't think I can do it. And he said, Bonnie, like you can totally do it. All it requires is just, you have to plan and you have to train a little bit. And, if I know when you're committed to something, you'll follow through. And I say that because in that moment, somebody needed to illuminate that for me, because very easily I could have just talked myself out of it, because in that space, in that energy of all the runners, right, that's great, like, oh yeah, I want to do it, but then the following week very easily could have been like, no, like that's not a thing. But anyways, he illuminated that for me. So the following year I did run the 21 kilometers, and again felt really proud of myself. It wasn't the best of times or anything, but I felt so proud of myself, and I hold that moment still with this day because it's something that I set my mind to. And I think because it was illuminated from my partner, I was able to, I know that because it was illuminated from my partner, I was able to do that. And so here's a quote I want to share from our cohort 13 leader. I've always understood the value of being able to identify the cause of failure, because for me, it helps me to learn where to start repairs. In this sort of stop the bleeding mentality, I have always felt like I work in literal triage, taking one traumatic event at a time and finding the source of bleeding first and foremost. This chapter and pause button have urged me to shift my perspective. While it still might be helpful to know what the problems are, I see now that it's ever more powerful to focus on energies on the positive forces that drive change. So I think, we're constantly reminded, at least I've worked in many different systems, of always finding the barriers or fixing the problems, or let's start with the solution. And just how often are we actually reminded to take a moment to pause and illuminate the best in others and the best in our organizations and the beautiful ripple it creates, right? I don't think that's our default way of being, and I think we could use more of it. The other part about, I think, all of the I's, it really does challenge us in a new way, right? It allows us to reflect on how we move through the world, and how much there is to really unlearn. I mean, we are ingrained in a lot of these practices from our early childhood context and in our college and higher education context, and there is a lot of unlearning that occurs. And so I think it really, the appreciative leadership as a text, appreciative leadership as a practice, allows us for an alternate path when we do tend to default to our kind of habitual ways of being and doing. So that's just a little story on Illumination, and I'll turn it back over to Susanna to walk us through the last I.
Okay, well, I shared my favorite I, right? This is an I that I struggled with. I really had a difficult time. It's inspiration, and it's awakening the innovative spirit. I think it was difficult for me to embrace this I because it truly didn't align with my beliefs, with my cultural background. I was raised to ignite my own fire, right? To that I didn't need motivation. I didn't need somebody to fuel my drive, to continue wanting to do. You know, I was raised to be told you have what it takes in you, and you're the one that needs to bring that out. So I think that that's the reason why I struggled with this I. And when I started using it and practicing it, it felt foreign to me. I have to be honest. It was so uncomfortable for me to use this. I felt like I wasn't being genuine. But I kept at it. I didn't give up. I kept practicing the I within my early childhood context. I go to 6 centers, and I would continue to do it. You know, it had to be very purposeful, and I had to keep it in my aware side of me that I was going to practice this. And then I started seeing positive outcomes. And that really helped me to see the value and the power that inspiration brings into the workplace. So I used it, I felt uncomfortable, then I started kind of getting a flow for it, and I started feeling comfortable with it. And I have to say, then and now, it has truly helped me build relationships, and it's truly strengthened a lot of relationships that I currently have. I'm going to share a story with you right now about a dandelion. It's an inspirational metaphor that was part of somebody's contribution to the I. But I really feel like maybe this dandelion story, the reason why it resonates with me is because I kind of relate to it. I kind of see how I was looking at maybe some of these things related to inspiration that were so difficult for me. And when I gave myself the opportunity to kind of flip it and look at it from a different perspective, and gave it that opportunity by being open-minded and practicing, that it really changed my ability to build relationships and to build that sense of community at work. As I embrace these behaviors and interactions that fostered in that inspiration piece, I truly see the value of it. I think that fellows who contributed these narratives also agree with this based on the themes that emerged. So the themes that came up around inspiration is that it shifts perspectives, creating new or different possibilities, that inspiration fuels hope, creativity, and innovation, that it cultivates confidence and personal power, and also that inspiration alone may not be enough to create action. Before I share the dandelion story with you, I just want to share that I think that each I brings to them their own feel and energy. And in cohort 12, we did the same thing we did with the other I's. We looked at the pause buttons, and we answered the questions once we did our practice out in the field, and then came back and kind of summarized what our experience was. I'm so glad that Lori thought outside the box and really gave this I a different twist. She tried something different with cohort 13. She invited fellows to use multiple modalities to share their story around inspiration. She invited them to draw metaphors for inspiration. And I think that was one of the best things that she could have done for this eye, because it truly brought it to life and it truly gave you that sense of inspiration. I don't know how else to say it. The whole purpose of the revision was to truly represent the eye and make it stronger. The metaphors that were brought up were a lot of drawings. I actually was struggling with two of them. I chose the dandelion, but they're so inspiring. The author of this particular story, she is from cohort 13, and she uses a dandelion story to illuminate and inspire how imperfection fosters resiliency, and how how our inner strength really can come out and provide that support in the world, in our day-to-day lives. So I want to share the story with you. It says, I don't know if you can, the quote you can't really appreciate because it's handwritten and it's so small, but her interpretation of this is, dandelions are loved by some and hated by others. But like the quote says, it depends on what you're looking for. Dandelions can be food for rabbits, bees, and humans. They provide little bursts of cheery yellow wherever they grow. They show varying stages of life, sometimes all at the same time. They come back every year. They provide children and some not too hard adults the whimsy of a wish, and the enjoyment of watching the seeds scatter to an unknown future as they move in the wind. These weeds gives us an example of hope. The idea that even though we may be viewed by some through a deficit lens, we can view ourselves and our future as something beautiful and perfect, but resilient and strong, and having never lost our ability to appreciate what we bring to the world. I live the power of this eye in early childhood education and in the context that I experience every day. And it energizes my passion for what I do. And I see how that impacts my peers and those working with young children.
Thanks, Susanna. I'm getting the notification all breakout rooms will close in 100 seconds. So maybe we could just hear in the chat, or because we are a small group, if you'd love to unmute and share a word or sentence that that you're inspired by our dialogue today, that represents what you're walking away with and where you see potential for helping shape the future of education. And I'll leave it kind of open to our audience for our attendees.
Oh, hi. I'm not a teacher, so first of all, I don't have this experience in teaching. I just wanted to share that reading back through the 5 eyes, I think if I was in your place, and maybe if I'm thinking to apply the appreciative leadership skills and like principles to my work, to life, day by day life, which I suppose might be very good. A few things might be difficult would be to involve others who don't think the same as I do, like people having different opinions, because at the same time it means that they might fight your opinions, and maybe you might find you're not ready to fight for your opinions, like instead of finding a collaborative approach, you might be ending up into the big discussion. And also trying to involve others, the last eye, into doing the best, not just for them, but also for the whole world, also the whole community, the whole